Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to another talk with Tashi. And as usual, we have a very important conversation today. And I am joined by a very special guest. Her name is Tesha Walker-Brown. And I will just invite her to come on right away and we'll get right in. Today, we are talking about suicide. So if you know someone who is struggling or you yourself could be struggling with suicidal thoughts, you do not want to miss this conversation.
And then you're saying, but I'm at this age and I'm still struggling with this thing. I'm still having to think about this thing that happened to me how many years ago.
Miss Tesha,
Greetings.
bring you right in.
Well, thanks for the invite. It is my absolute pleasure to be able to speak on this very important topic that, I realize many times we shy away from discussing.
That's true. So tell us about your work. Let our audience know who Tesha Walker-Brown is, and how you came to this conversation.
Well, I am a trained counselor, a counseling psychologist. I've been in the profession for over 17 years. So it's been a bit, wow. Right? I am trained at the master's level as a counseling psychologist. In my substantive role, I work with students at a very well-known university in Jamaica. Right. And so all my working life, though, I have been in student-related services, activities.
And these students are young adults?
Young adults, for sure. Well, young adults, the age range, because it's university. Right. So the age range from, adults to young adults to, older persons. Right. But majority of the persons that I interface with are young adults. And a counseling unit is a part of the section that I manage. I also counsel. I counsel I'm one of the counselors at the Power Faith Ministries. I counsel voluntarily there, and I also counsel at my home church, which is the Portmore Holiness Christian Church. So I'm one of the counselors there. And as I said, I am trained in this area. Type of counseling offered, general counseling, but the issues that come to the fore are varying. And so, yes, I have dealt with persons who have, thought of suicide in terms of the ideation, persons who would have attempted suicide because of the different issues happening in their lives and their inability to, think that they had the wherewithal to deal with those issues. So, wow. I don't know if that qualifies me to be on this platform.
It certainly does. Yeah. It certainly does. And this is an important conversation, as you said. But, I can recall that in, I think, 2021, the Gleaner had reported that there was a 16% increase in suicide. And we know that was smack dead in the pandemic. Right. It was kind of expected. Now, when Jamaica is compared to the worldwide scheme, our suicide rate is not high compared to that, but we know that one life lost is too many. So, right. We really want to talk about that because our young people, more and more, we see signs of them losing hope. And we probably hear people often, talk about this whole matter of wanting to end their lives. And the truth is, maybe there are several people, I want to say majority, but since I do not have any statistics to back that up, and you could probably help me, but I think that there are many people who actually have the thoughts, but they don't talk about it, and they certainly don't talk about what has caused them to get there, because they feel shame, guilt, just dirt, or a range of other negative emotions well up in them, so they feel like they can't talk to anybody about it. So I want us to begin by, tell us, what is suicide, and is there a difference between a suicide and a suicide attempt? Just define those terms for us.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of the definition for suicide, it is the act of someone intentionally taking his or her own life. So it's an intentional act, and that's something that we put on the table. So it is something that you would have thought about and then you would have acted on. The suicide attempt certainly is different from a suicide act, because the attempt is that person attempting to, or let me not use the same word, but that person would have tried to commit the act of suicide but would not have been successful in doing so. And I mean, it for those individuals, it is important for us to, when we realize that these things are happening and we see that they would have attempted, for us to reach out to them. And what I find many times is that there is the taboo that is attached to suicide. The taboo, because there are many persons, I don't know if you want us to go down this line, but there are many persons who, are of the belief that those individuals who commit suicide, they will say in layman's term, have no lot and part with God, because they would have murdered themselves. And so many persons really don't, they don't want to talk about it.
Yes, that's a whole other discussion that we could explore at another time, because the truth is, the believers are just not sure, and those who have lost would want to believe that their loved ones are in heaven, depending on how that whole situation panned out. And then there are those who, they're just not sure. But we could explore that and look at, what does the Bible have to say. But you are right. In reference to.
So there's that taboo. So the suicide act is when that you are successful. The suicide attempt is the unsuccessful attempt to take one's life.
Okay. All right, great. So thank you for that clarification. I have read and would have often heard that suicide is a public health concern. Could you shed some light on why that is?
Well, what as counselors, as persons in the helping profession, we are guided by the DSM, which is the diagnostical statistical manual that guides things that are considered to be disorders. And suicide is one of those that's listed as a psychological disorder. So the definition for the suicide and what causes suicide is listed as a disorder. And so it is a mental health issue, because it has to do with how it is that the thought pattern and how people think about this thing and how they process it and how they deal with the issues that are there. And so we find that many times the whole particularly for Jamaicans, when it comes on to mental health issues and mental health concerns, we are not readily those persons who will seriously look into them and seriously talk about them. I know.
What would you say is how does it affect the country as a whole? This whole matter. So we're looking at, we see that it is a mental health concern because of the nature of what it is. But why is it a public health concern?
It's a public health concern because if it is that this is something that is not addressed and not dealt with, certainly it affects the nation. And if you look at the statistics that is around, you said it earlier that it may not be one of the leading causes of death for Jamaicans, but in other nations it is. In the USA, you'll find that those rates are high. In Jamaica, we're not as high. We're one of the lowest. And probably we could explore why that is so. In comparison to other nations. But what you find is in 2021, the rate increased drastically. It went all the way up to 16 point something. And it therefore means that it's a public health concern, because if it is not addressed, if we do not have these conversations, you'll find that the numbers will continue to rise. Right? Because it is something that is swept under the carpet. We're not dealing with it as a nation. We're not addressing it in our schools with our children. We're not looking at it in the workplaces. We're not dealing with it where our men are concerned. Then certainly there is the possibility that the numbers could rise. And you find that when we have these suicide rates, you talk about disruption of homes, families, and all of those things. So certainly it affects the nation, because any type of death at all affects the nation.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now I want us to talk about the warning signs for suicide, those who are at risk, because sometimes people will leave a note, sometimes they don't, and then sometimes in hindsight there are people who would look back and say, how did I miss this? So what are some of the warning signs that we could look out for to know that someone is at risk for suicide?
And well, I don't know if you're going to get here, but let me start off by saying that statistics across the world has revealed that men are more successful in committing the act of suicide than women. And we can delve into that further. But we're talking about now, going back to your question, what are the warning signs?
Yes.
And there are several things really. Sometimes the truth be told, because you're not trained and your eyes are not trained to see this, you just ignore or don't even realize that it is in your face. But here are some of the telltale signs that we can look out for. If a person is depressed and that depressive sort of feeling lasts for a long time, you hear them talking about being hopeless, them don't want to live anymore, or they may not even use the word that they don't want to live anymore. Them just ask some question, what this life is all about, you see them going to that mode. They weren't like that previously, and you realize that they start talking about that. You realize too, for some persons it might not necessarily be that they're expressing their hopelessness, but they may start to, you may realize that they're rearranging things, and this rearrangement is not in a way to say, so they are now rearranging their lives, and they are deciding now that, I'm going to give this away. And they're giving away things that would be very dear to them. And you see that these are happening. Open your eyes, look, and ask the question. If you're not able to seek someone who is able to ask the important questions, you may see that these persons, if it is that they have lost their jobs, and you realize that they're now trying to isolate themselves from people, they don't. These were persons who were very sociable, wanted to be around persons, and you realize that they're withdrawn in that sense. You realize too that they may say, they're putting things in order, and they're telling you to look after me. If anything should happen to me, my wife will do this. I want you to look after the kids, or if I should go tomorrow, how would you? They start to ask some questions. How would you feel? Look for those signs. Also, if it is that some persons are in situations, when we look at the teenagers, many times it may be the situation around them. And so the parents who are in their spaces, who may be the cause of some of what they're going through, may not even see it, because them just say, yeah, Pitney, you feel listen to me as the parent. But if as the outsider, you see that this youngster, this teenager is the same withdrawal thing happening, look into it rather, right? If you realize that these persons are coming to you, they want to ask certain questions, they're not going to, but they're probably suggesting certain things in that respect, don't shun it and tell them, say, stop them foolishness, nothing about them things. Explore it with them.
Seriously.
Take it seriously and ask the question, are you thinking about suicide? And don't feel like if you say the word, then it will put thoughts in their heads. It's the converse. When you say the word and you bring this up to them, it means that somebody is seeing them. Somebody is keying into the fact that I'm thinking about this. And then when you start that conversation with them, it will cause them to open up more than likely. Or if you are not able to start the conversation, as I said earlier, you can channel someone who is able to come in and to bring that into.
All right, awesome. You've given us a number of signs, and I want to go right into what are some of the causes or factors that would lead to someone being at risk for suicide. What are some of those factors? So apart from the signs, which would be a kind of a visible manifestation, so to speak, you notice withdrawal, depression, they listen to the kind of conversation and the tone, looking hopeless and talking about ending life or making changes, rearranging, maybe even writing a will and saying, take care of the family, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what are some of the events that could happen in people's lives that would lead to them being at risk?
And the thing is that they're varied, a whole heap of them, and I don't think we can exhaust all of them here. But I mentioned one earlier, when it is, because particularly for the COVID period, when many persons would have lost their jobs, you realize that there was a spike in the suicide rate for 2021 as a result of some of the things that would have happened that preceded coming out of the height of the COVID into the following year. So many persons would have lost their jobs, and so they have no means of providing for themselves or their family members. And for that, might as well me just take with myself. Really, what can I use myself? There are persons who will go through different psychological stressors. Either you're in a relationship that you are losing, or you have lost a relationship that was dear to you. You will find that these persons too become more susceptible. You have those who have issues in the home, the family issues and all, and these are being amplified. And so you also will find that those are risks that are associated. There are persons who have illnesses, and the illnesses are such that it causes pain and distress and all of that. And many persons, what we call euthanasia.
Yes.
Yes, they attempt to take your own life, because you're ill and you're going through that. So you want somebody to do that for you, because, the pain and the stress that comes with you going through the illness of persons will do that. And then you have some teenagers in that realm who, there's the change in your body, the changes happening around you. You're trying to find yourself, you're trying to fit in, and many times you're not able to fit in, and you may be ridiculed, you may be bullied, and all of those things, cause strain on the individual who believe that they are not worth anything. And so they start to internalize all of that which comes to them from the external. And then, all of this is they're feeding on it. And the energy that comes from the outside feeds on it. And so those are situations that can lead to individuals, wanting to take their own lives.
I want to ask because, well, I want to note also that people, when people have traumatic events or things that really send them down a particular road, the time between the event and when they begin to consider suicide is usually a good while, right? Like it doesn't happen immediately. It would be over time, a kind of a consumption of these kind of thoughts and whatever else is happening. But I want to ask, what about being abused? Could child abuse, for example, could someone in their 30s, 60s, 70s begin to consider seriously taking their own life because they were abused as a child, and so on? Is there any?
Certainly. And yes, abuse is also linked to persons taking their own lives. If particularly if you believe that those who, and any type of abuse, it's not just sexual abuse, you have different types of abuse, and all of those come to bear on the individual, and those persons are susceptible to taking their own lives, or to get involved in behavior that is untoward. And so you ask the question, if it is that I was abused at a younger age, when I'm now at the older age, if it can still affect me, certainly it can. Certainly, because I would have gone through for individuals who are older, they believe that, okay, probably as I age, this thing will leave me. But then it rests with you, because you would not have gotten the help that you need. And so it rests with you, it continues with you, and then you're saying, but I'm at this age and I'm still struggling with this thing. I'm still having to think about this thing that happened to me how many years ago. And it has not gotten any clearer for me. And so what's the sense? Why bother? Why continue? So again, the same series of hopelessness, which would have continued. And then you are at this age and you're saying, by this time, nobody sees me. Nobody even cares. No help is forthcoming. And so, yes, abuse and several other things can also, the feeling that you're not loved, you're not worth anything. And so that can certainly lead to suicide in later years.
Wow.
Just to say, interestingly, when I was looking at the statistics, the age, I think it was the age range that from 60 something to 70 odd males, there was a greater attempt, a greater suicide rate for that age range. And that was alarming, when you sit down and examine the data. And I'm like, at the age 60 something to 70, you should be cruising now,
Yeah.
Looking about how you can impart your knowledge to, the younger folks and the younger generation. But if it is that you don't understand what is happening in your area and in your space, and you've not come to you come now to the realization that I can address my own issues. You've not gotten to that point, then the distress is even more, because you are now doing the self-examination and you're saying, I should have.
Yeah, it gets complicated.
Yeah.
So what is it about? Why is it that more men attempt suicide than women, or more men?
So more women attempt.
More women attempt,
men are successful.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it is also said that because of the means in which men use to commit the acts, men's acts are more violent than the women. So a man would take the gun. I don't want to be so graphic, but he'll use the gun, and the chances of him surviving is less likely for somebody to come in and help. The women know they might take the pill, and then somebody come and realize it and then pump it out of the system, or so they have less violent means of attempting to. Yeah. Okay. And that's where it rests.
Are there
and why more men attempt to? The other thing is that we also need to examine how men deal with issues when they have them, and how women deal with issues when they have them. That also contributes. We can also examine how men were raised to address and deal with their problems versus how women were raised to address and deal with their problems.
Wow, we are out of time, but no need to worry. Join us next week for the continuation of this conversation on suicide. Are there always warning signs? Is it possible that someone would, manage to maybe hide what they're going through successfully? There are no signs and they commit suicide, and everybody's like, what? Wait, she was so happy. He was, just loved life and so on. Is that possible?
A story is told of a young man a medical doctor. He was ill during his final year of med school, and every step was pulled out for his recovery, his mental health state, and he was very optimistic about his recovery because he wanted to go do his finals and to get the exams done and all of them something there. And he pulled through something that would have killed him, didn't. And his mental state at the time was that I'm going to get through this. But then a few years after, the same young man who pulled through that situation took his own life.